So, welcome to the next online messages brought to you by the Friends of Center Congregational Church. This is Reverend Tom Bentley, hoping that these messages can help you in the journey of life. If you'd like to know more about Center Congregational Church, there'll be some information for you at the end of this video. So, thanks for spending time with us. So grace and peace to you from our friend Jesus. Navigating this world is a challenge. Jesus confronts us where we are, invites us to love and grace, but shows us what's in the way. There's a story in the Gospel of Luke that makes this pretty clear. He told his next story to some who were complacently pleased with themselves over their moral performance and looked down their noses at the common people. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee, the other a tax man. The Pharisee posed and prayed like this: "Oh God, I thank you I am not like other people, robbers, crooks, adulterers, or even, heaven forbid, like this tax man. I fast twice a week and tithe all my income." Meanwhile, the tax man slumped in the shadows, his face in his hands, not daring to look up, saying, "God, give mercy, forgive me, a sinner." Jesus commented, "This man, not the other, went home right with God. If you walk around with your nose in your air, you're going to end up flat on your face. But if you're content to be simply yourself, you will become more than yourself." My journey in life is now getting to be a few decades. That's an understatement. It's been a journey from that arrogant Pharisee to, by default, the tax collector crying, "Forgive me, God." I will always struggle with an accumulated inventory of what I call the shoulda, coulda lists. They come to me now. Sometimes the memory's over 50 years old. I remember something probably minor at the time, but I might have let somebody down. And that comes back to bother me just for a moment, to remind me that I'm frail and prone to making mistakes. Now, this sounds like a torturous journey if you're accumulating the inventory, but actually, I'm grateful these days for this long list because it breaks down this armor called ego. Ego is what we make up in life, and it gives us, in the end, a defended and false soul. It's what Jesus is confronting with this story. The Pharisee had a false soul that he defended with arrogance. The tax collector was totally vulnerable and open to God. This ego thing wants you and me to be the Pharisee and not that tax collector in that place of confession. This ego gets in the way of our true selves. It's a protective and false device. It builds up our image. It builds up an inflated sense of ourselves. Ego thrives on comparison. It constantly compares our worth to others, which can lead to feelings of inadequacy, jealousy, a superior attitude, distancing ourselves from others. Richard Rohr, my Franciscan father, mentor, says, when you haven't found inner meaning, you will always substitute outer performance. We go for the applause rather than for the outcome. That's what we do in that world of false self. In that world of false self, we create the need to be right, and we make sure that everybody feels wrong about it. We fear failure, so we puff ourselves up. Building an ego is not a bad thing in itself. It's actually part of life. It's the journey from emotional immaturity of the young to the possibility of an emotional and spiritual maturity in the later part of life. We need that ego to get out there and figure out who we are, to sort of fake it till we make it. But when that ego becomes so rigid that it's an armor protecting us from the good and the threatening, we become isolated and alone. Ironically, you have to have a strong ego to finally begin to understand how to get rid of it. In the Hindu teachings, there's 4 stages of life. The first is the student. The second is a householder. The third is a hermit. And the fourth is the one who renunciates all that came before. Not because it was bad, but because it's no longer necessary. The student, of course, is that learning phase. The householder is when we accumulate all this ego and stuff and build ourselves up. And then we begin to withdraw out of necessity from the fray of competition because we're not doing that well with it. But then this cleansing of the soul where we can renunciate. In the Hindu story, you wander from village to village begging. I don't think that's necessary. But to let go of this thing that we've created over life, this thing called ego, we need to work hard and figure out how to do it. Right now, we're in a time which is of great disorder and increasingly so. Our current time is devolving into chaos and violence because our culture is dominated by the cult of the narcissistic ego. We're in a time of increasing cultural apostasy, and as apostasies individuals, that word means to go to false worship, not to worship the divine and the loving God. And this is empowered by this obsession with the false self, the need to build it up. This ego making that wants to make us significant is actually separates us from others, and it's a control which ultimately separates us from God. A psychiatrist back in 2014, Reef Karim, he'd been working with young people, and he basically summed it up. He says, little kids today don't want to be doctors or lawyers. They just want to be famous. He asked the kid, what do you want to be? They often pick some odd individual that had often not made much of a contribution, but was just famous. They wanted to be famous. He actually developed this practice around helping people with fame addiction. We so often get caught up in something we're not that we fixate on it. It can become a neurosis because we constantly need to be adored and validated. Does that sound like what's happening in our world? I think so. Our unchecked ego blocks the way for us to becoming an instrument of God's grace. And maybe we try to enter some self-help thing or some personal growth thing, but the warning is if we try to change the ego with the help of the ego, we only create a better disguised ego. It turns out that there is a way to cure this ego stuff. It's called suffering. That's probably the most important first step. It usually comes to us through heartbreaks and disappointments and failings that are beyond our control. But every time that happens, it puts a crack in this false armor. Richard Rohr wrote a book, Falling Upward, and it's about you get to that point in life when you're not going to succeed. You're going to fall somehow from wherever you are, and you can fall forward or you can fall back into despair. Falling upward allows us to let go of that which is non-essential and to begin to take on what's really essential in our journey of living and our journey in the spirit. Rohr instructs that there's 3 things we have to get out of our way to let this ego go. The first is the compulsion to be successful. Second is the compulsion to be right, especially theologically. And finally, there is the compulsion to be powerful, to have everything under control. Well, it isn't, and it can't be, and that is a false self driving us. If we can let the vicissitudes of life and the hard storms and the hard things in life break into our hearts, yes, we'll be like that tax collector over in the shadows, knowing and feeling constantly about our shortcomings. But that's where there's a vulnerability to the grace of God. The Apostle Paul was an arrogant, egotistical individual. You can see that in the book of Acts when you see documented how he persecuted others for being wrong, even to the point of seeing them get killed. He was a judgmental soul. Then he got his mind blown on the road to Damascus. Something happened to him, and he turned around and he realized all the wrong that he had done, but he also understood there was a new possibility to walk with Jesus. And at the end of all the work that he did, he wrote to his beloved friend Timothy, he said, "You take over. I'm about to die. My life an offering on God's altar. This is the only race worth running. I've run hard right to the finish, believed all the way. All that's left now is the shouting, God's applause. Depend on it. He's an honest judge. He'll do right not only by me, but by everyone eager for his coming." The coming of Christ is not something I believe you have to wait for until all creation is somehow sucked up into a vacuum cleaner. I do believe that the second coming is now in the heart of the transformed soul. That's a resurrection of the highest order. But we can't go there until we kill that false self and let the remnants of what we are, which are actually the true pieces, find a wholeness, not in our shenanigans, but in the love that comes in Jesus Christ. In his name, amen.
So thanks again for spending time with us. If you'd like to know more about Center Congregational Church, you can go online at center-church.org. And of course, we'd always love to hear from you. You can call us anytime at the number provided above or the email address. So peace and best wishes. Goodbye.